is a talk that I'm about to give here in Borough Park. It is for the organization called Nashei Cares. The topic is doing Chesed in the proper way regarding Bikur Chaylim and Nicham Avelim, the sick and the grieving. I'm deeply grateful to Mrs. Berkowitz and to Mrs. Leshkowitz and to the officers of Nashei Aguda for having invited me to come to speak to all of you. The Mishnah in Ovos and Perik Beis Mishnah test tells us that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 Talmidim, and he told each of those Talmidim that they should pick out a certain midah, a certain characteristic that they felt was the prime and the most important characteristic that a Yid should have. So Rabbi Eliezer picked out one midah, Rabbi Yeshua picked out another one, Rabbi Yossi another one, Rabbi Shimon another one, and finally Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach picked out a midah, and he said every person should have a leiv tov, a good heart. Omar lahem, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to all his Talmidim, Roya ani es divrei Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach, I see that the one who said the right thing, the one who said the most important midah that a Yid should have, that's Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach, that's a leiv tov. Because every other midah that a person can have is all inclusive in this leiv tov. The Bnei Yisoscha tells us that the Yemei HaSfira are 49 days. The words leiv tov are b'gematria 49. The period between Pesach and Shavuos is a time of leiv tov. The Slonim Rebbe writes in the Sivas Olam, why do we count from 1 to 49? Actually, just the opposite. If we're anticipating Shavuos, if you won a lottery and you knew that you were going to get the lottery in 49 days, every day you would count 48 days until I could tell my boss goodbye, 30 days, 20 days till I can get out of here, 5 days till I can retire, and then I got it. So you would count downward. Why do we count upward? The answer is because the days of Sfira are not only anticipation to Shavuos, it's a question of accomplishment to Shavuos. So every day we go higher and higher and higher. And that's what the Slonim Rebbe says in the Sivas Olam. He says every day we are supposed to improve our midos so that by the time Shavuos comes around, we have achieved that great midah of the 49 days of leiv tov. He says something also very interesting. The carbon that we had to bring, one had to bring when he brought the Omer, well, the carbon, the dominating idea was the sa'irim, barley, which is ma'achal behema, which animals eat. However, when it comes to Shavuos, the carbon is shtei halechem, achilas adam, the food that man eats. In the beginning, when Klal Yisrael was at the period of Pesach, when they were at the period of Yetzias Mitzrayim, they were at the lowest level. That was sa'irim, ma'achal behema. But then as we get higher and higher and higher, we get all the way until Ma'achal Adam. And he says one more thing. That word in Hebrew, which we say Usfartem means to count. But in a Chassidish way, he says Sfartem also comes from the Lashon of Saphir, a sapphire. In other words, Usfartem lachem. You're supposed to make yourself like a glowing diamond in these 49 days. And so tonight, we have come together in the Yemei HaSfira, and we are going to learn tonight how to develop this leiv tov, how to improve ourselves, so that we each become this beautiful sapphire with a golden, beautiful, glowing characteristic. What is the essence of a Yid? What is the essence of Adam? We said that we go from Ma'achal Behema to Ma'achal Adam. There's a very interesting story. Somebody once came to Rav Meir Shapiro, and with great chutzpah said to this great man, there's a Gemara in Yevamos that's a racist Gemara. What does he mean that it's racist? The Gemara says over there in Yevamos Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. It's based on a pasuk in Yecheskel Lamed Daled, pasuk Lamed Aleph. V'atein tzoni, you Klal Yisrael, you are my sheep, tzon marisi, the sheep of my flock. Adam atem, you are man. A Yid is a mensch. So the Gemara says, Atem Kuruyin Adam. You, Bnei Yisrael, are called mention, Ve'ein Ovdei Koichovim Kuruyin Adam. But a goy is not called Adam. A goy is not called a mensch. So the person said, what do you mean a goy is not a mensch? A goy is not Adam? You want to say that he's not religious? Fine. You want to say he's not Erech? Fine. But what do you mean he's not Adam? Listen to the Torah that Meir Shapiro said on the spot, and that's going to be our thing tonight. He says, what does the Gemara say? Atem Kuruyin Adam. All of you in Klal Yisrael, as one, you are called Adam. That means if a Yid in France hears that a cemetery in Switzerland, the Yiddish cemetery, was desecrated, that Yid in France is going to feel pain. If we here in New York hear that a shul was burned in California, we're going to feel pain. But what does a guy in Turkey care about a guy in Arkansas? What does a guy in New Hampshire care what happened to a guy in Denmark? They are separate people. But Atem Adam, all of us, we feel the pain of every Yid, no matter where we are, because we are really one. But we have to learn then, if Atem Adam, if we, Klal Yisrael, feel the pain as one man, then we have to understand, how do we feel the pain? You have to feel the pain in the right way. You have to feel the chesed, do the chesed, as we said before, in the proper manner. Let me give you an example. This past Sukkot, I had the schus to be in Eretz Yisrael, and I met with the Rav of the old city of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Victor Neventhal. Rabbi Victor Neventhal was a chavrusa of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he told me every day they would go to a room, they would go to a place where nobody had any permission whatsoever to interrupt them, and they would sit and learn privately. So of course, when Rav Shlomo Zalman was nifter, one of the maspidim was Rabbi Victor Neventhal. So he told me that he told this story because he felt this story, more than any other story, typified the sensitivity of Rav Shlomo Zalman. Doing chesed in a broad way, understanding all aspects of what he was doing. It happened that there was a girl in Yerushalayim who never had a broken engagement. And her father had told her that he would take her to Rav Shlomo Zalman for a bracha. So she always asked her father, when are you going to take me? And he was very, very busy. Finally, the only time that he was able to take his daughter for a bracha was on Purim. So he came to Rav Shlomo Zalman with his daughter, and he walked into the dining room where Rav Shlomo Zalman was sitting, I guess with family, and he bent down, he saw already that Rav Shlomo Zalman had washed, and he was starting the Suda. So he said, Rebbe, I apologize that I'm interrupting the Suda, but I promised my daughter that I would bring her here. She has a broken engagement, and she's down, and she would like to have a bracha. So Rav Shlomo Zalman said, fine, I'll go out and I'll speak to her. She was waiting in the outside anteroom. So the father said, no, Rebbe, chas v'shalom, I see that you sat down and washed. I'll bring her in here. It's not a problem. I don't want the Rav to be matriach. He said, no, it's no problem whatsoever. Rav Shlomo Zalman got up, and he walked out. He walked out with the father, and when this girl saw that the great tzaddik, the Gadol Hador, Rav Shlomo Zalman, was coming towards her, she just melted. She couldn't believe that he was coming. And he spoke to her, and he wished her, and he said to her that he was sure that she was going to find her right zivug, and he gave her a bracha. And she was so overcome that Rav Shlomo Zalman would give her a bracha and give her the assurance that she would find the right zivug eventually, that she started crying. And as she was crying, Rav Shlomo Zalman turned to the father and he said, now you understand why I didn't want her to come in the dining room. I understood that she might be overwhelmed by my bracha, and therefore she might be embarrassed to cry in front of the people at the table. So I, Dafka, went out to her so that if she did cry, she wouldn't be embarrassed. That's looking at the whole broad picture. Let me tell you a story that I heard from Rab Moshe Chodesh about his great father, Rab Meir Chodesh. The first one to tell me this story was Rab Osher Arayeli, and I confirmed it with Rab Moshe Chodesh about his father. Rab Meir Chodesh was the Mashgiach in Hebron for many, many years. And Nebuch, in his final illness, he was in the hospital. And friends and family were always there. And a young medic once came in, and he had to take blood from Rab Meir Chodesh. So Rab Meir said, wait, he wants to send everybody out of the room. So everybody was surprised. The children were surprised. Rav Chodesh always wanted everybody to be there, or at least his family members to be there when the doctors were there, so that they would understand what's happening. They understood the medicine. They understood the treatments. And why did all of a sudden did he send out everybody when this young doctor was going to go draw blood? But he absolutely insisted, and everybody had to leave. Afterwards, when they came in, when the doctor finished, so his son asked him, why did you send everybody out of the room? Listen to what Rav Meir Chodesh said. He said, when any doctor has to draw blood from an old man, it's very difficult because it's hard to find the veins in the arm of an old man. So that's any doctor is going to have difficulty. This young doctor probably doesn't have much experience even by young people. So imagine, first of all, it's hard to find my veins. And second of all, he's probably inexperienced. Could you imagine how embarrassed he would have been to pinch and prick me and find until he found the vein if all of you were standing there? So it was worth for Rav Meir Chodesh that this young doctor would pinch him and truly try to find the vein. And he would be in pain. But to save the embarrassment of that doctor, he sent everybody out. That's somebody who looks at the total picture. Not like a certain lady who was in an Arizona hospital. And in Arizona, it's very, very hot. And Nebuch was a young woman who had many, many illnesses. And a friend of hers came in, and this poor woman was hooked up to all kinds of tubes and monitors. And this woman comes in to this lady in the hospital, and she says to her, you're so lucky to be here. You got air conditioning, you don't have to fight the traffic, and your meals are served on time. In 1 minute, the nurse came running in and said, what did you say to my patient? All the monitors and all the on the tubes, on the screens, they all went crazy. You're a human disaster. Get out and never come back here. That's a lack of sensitivity. The Gemara tells us, as Rebbe Bronstein mentioned, the Gemara in Yevamis Ayin Tes. But let's listen to the order of the Gemara. I've heard this Gemara a dozen times. We've all heard it. But when I was preparing this talk, something occurred to me that I believe, at least B'derech Drush, is certainly emes. Listen to this Gemara. Shloisha Simonim Yesh B'Omazu. There are 3 Simonim for this nation, the Yiddish nation. Harachmonim, V'Habaishonim, V'Goyim Lechasodim. That's the order that the Gemara gives it. Now, I was wondering, it seems to me that the order is not proper. Rachmanim means I'll have Rachmanis on somebody else. Goyim Lechasodim is something that I do that's on somebody else. Baishonim means that I'm modest, that I'm reserved, and that I'm private. Why is that in the middle? It should be those characteristics that I do for other people, Rachmanim, Goyim Chasadim, and then Baishanim, something that I am myself. How does Baishanim fit right in between Rachmanim and Goyim Chasadim? And I think that Chazal are trying to tell us something. The Baishanim is not on the person, that's the Rachman or the Goyim Chasadim. No, Chazal are telling you that the guy you're trying to do a favor is a Baishan. Don't make him a public display of your mitzvah. Understand that he's a private person. Understand that he's a reserved and a modest person. And he may have sensitivities. And you want to go do your mitzvah. You want to do Goyim Chasadim. You want to have Achmanis. And you're going to make him your esrik. You're going to make him your Dvar mitzvah. And he's embarrassed. A person has to look at the total picture. In the Mesilas Yesharim, in Perik Chof, he tells us, Mishkal HaChasidus. Mishkal HaChasidus means let us weigh and let us put on a scale our piety, our kindness. That's what Chasidus really means. A Chassid is somebody who's erlach. A Chassid in the Gemara terms is somebody who's kind and considerate. So the Mesilas Yesharim tells us, many times when we try to do a chesed, it's not exactly how it appears right away. A person is supposed to see sometimes the maisa looks good, but the outcome and what comes because of it is bad. Then of course then you have to leave it. But if you do it, you're going to be a chayte and not a chassid. Let us watch how Rav Pam, who quotes this Mesilas Yesharim, in his wonderful Sefer HaTorah Lamelech, gives us some examples of people who may think to themselves, we're a chassid, but really Rapam is calling them a choyte. Listen to these three examples. The first two for sure, he means they are choyte. The third one, we'll see a gewaldige sensitivity. Rapam says sometimes he comes to a chasana, and there's a young fellow there who's married, and he's going to stay late. He's going to be Mesameach Chasam V'Kala. But his parents are babysitting, and his parents are not going to sleep until he comes home. What right does he have to go way into the night to be Mesameach Chasam V'Kala at that expense of his parents who are waiting up for him? And he says even if he has a babysitter, it's not right to keep a babysitter out so late. There are other people at the wedding. You're not the brother of the chassan. I'm doing chesed. I'm the chassid, the Sameach Chasam V'Kala. But you have no right to keep your parents waiting. He gives another example. Sometimes a wife prepares supper. The kids are sitting at the table. The wife is expecting the husband to be home. He's not home. The kids have to start eating without him. Supper's getting cold. She's getting frantic. Finally, he walks in an hour later. I took my friend to the airport. What do you mean you took your friend to the airport? I'm a chassid. I did a favor. But according to Rapam, that's not a chassid. That's a choyte. You don't call. Your wife prepared supper. It's getting cold. It can't be at the expense of somebody else. And he brings another thing. An amazing little story. The Chavetz Chaim, long before he was in Radin, was in another little town for Sukkot. And in that town, there was only one lulav to be had. So of course everybody used it, everybody made the bracha. Now it comes time for davening. There are a lot of tzaddikim in the Beis HaMedrash there. Who is going to hold this lulav and esrig during the davening? During On Hashem Moshiach, during Hoydel Hashem Kitov Kiliolam Chastei? Who's going to hold it? So of course they gave it to the Chavetz Chaim. So the Chavetz Chaim said, no, I'm not going to use it. And he didn't use it, he gave it to somebody else. And they asked him afterwards why. He said, because I know there are other very, very big Talmidei Chachamim in Shul. And they may have a Hakpada. Why do I have it and they don't have it? So I don't want that people should have any Hakpada at all. That's why he was willing to give it up. Here you would think it's a great big mitzvah to hold the lulav and the esrig during Hallel. He says, no, but if a person has pain and he feels that maybe he deserves it and I don't, then it's worth it that I shouldn't have it during the Nenuim, but at least I made the bracha on it. That's sensitivity. And if that's the case, then we have to understand, in all mitzvahs, that we are supposed to imitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Bikkur Cholim is one of them. If that's the case, then perhaps, even when we are doing that great mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim, we have to ask ourselves, are we being a chassid or are we being a choyte? What we did for all of you is that we prepared for everyone. Tonight, before you will leave, you will all get this sheet of guidelines. Guidelines that we prepared, that we believe are imperative in being able to be Makayim the mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim and Nichum Avelim, as we will discuss it. Before you go to be Mavaka Choila, you have to ask a family, does the patient want visitors? I know people who are very embarrassed to be in hospital gowns, who are very embarrassed to be seen with all the tubes hanging out. You're going to go and visit someone because you're going to do the chesed and that person feels terrible and he's embarrassed? That's not a chassid, that's a choyte. There are some people, a woman told me, it was so hard to tell her husband's friends not to come to the hospital. The poor guy had no strength for conversation. And people come and they don't ask. And they're making the person sicker, they don't realize. So before we go to visit anyone in the hospital, you have to ask the family, are they up to visitors? I remember, I have a brother who's in Lakewood. And I remember when Rav Shneur Kotler, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Livracha, was very, very sick. It was the last weeks of his life. And I remember, I'm not a Talmud in Lakewood, so I didn't learn there. But of course, I saw him many, many times. He knew certainly who I was, but I hadn't seen him throughout his illness. And somebody said to me, I was there for a Shabbos. Before Shalosh Shudas, you want to go in and say good Shabbos to Rav Shneur? And I said, no, I'm not that close to him. It's got to be very embarrassing for him. A person, Nebuch, when he's that sick, is gaunt, he's pale, he doesn't feel comfortable. He surely doesn't want to be seen by people that he's not that close with. So I'm going to be able to go and say, I said Good Shabbos to Rav Schneier. But I felt it was more important not to go. Because it's the derech eretz to give somebody his dignity. So before we go visit somebody, find out if you're a welcome visitor. And make your visit short. There are some people who just don't know when to leave. And they feel they're going to go to do the mitzvah. And the person is in pain. And he has to talk to the doctor. And he has to have bodily functions we all understand, and the person can't do that. And he's not going to get off the bed when people are there. You want to do the mitzvah? There's a mashir. There's no amount of time that you have to be there. You're there for a few minutes. You made your effort. You said, and if you're very close, you can stay longer. But otherwise, keep the visit short. And don't ask so many questions about his illness. There are many people who don't stop prying. It's not your business. If it's a very, very close friend, that's one thing. But otherwise, what right does anybody have to ask a chayla what the doctor said, what the prognosis is? Many chaylim are in denial. They don't want to talk about their illness. They really believe they're going to get better. It's painful for them to talk about the illness. Never, ever read a patient's hospital charts. It's not a joke. All these things that we are saying here tonight is because we heard complaints of people who do those things. You walk into the hospital and the chart is there. It's not your business. It should be made like a chayim abeinu geshem, just like reading somebody's mail. And as the Rebbitzin mentioned, how many times does it happen? 9:30, the nurses come in, it's time to leave. So fine, so they say it nicely once. 9:35, they said it half nicely. By 9:45, they're frustrated. And you know what happens? Then they become nasty, not to this group, but they become nasty to the group tomorrow and to all other Fuma Yidden. And that's the Chilul Hashem. And that's the pain, because there are some patients that really need visitors at an extra time, but the nurses aren't going to allow because we abuse that privilege. And don't stare at a patient if he's disfigured or if he's got all the tubes coming out of him. I remember somebody that was very close to me never had face surgery. He had cancer on the face. I was very close to him. I came in the day after surgery. When I saw him, I thought I would chalash right on the spot. And I just walked out and I saw the doctor. The doctor came in, he happened to be a Frum doctor. I said to the doctor, "Do you see what he looks like?" So the doctor said, "He looks as beautiful as a rose." Of course, to a doctor, that's beautiful. So I thought it's like a rose with thorns. But you're not supposed to stare. You make a person feel uncomfortable. And a person should know that if a doctor walks in or a nurse walks in, it's time for us to walk out. Mrs. Lubman knows better than anybody. And be considerate. Be considerate of the patient's roommates, as was mentioned. And one thing, never, ever tell a patient that his doctor is no good. Oh, don't laugh. There are many people who do that. I'm doing a chesed. I want to save your life. You got that doctor, he's awful. But if you have anything to say, go and speak to one of the relatives. But never, chas v'shalom, should you tell that to a person. There's a pediatrician in Muncie who once said a terrific word. And every morning from now on, when you daven Shemoneh Esrei, you'll be able to have kavanah the way he touched this phrase in the Chalkei Chaim. Mabel al Arayin, how he touched it. We all say in the Chalkei Chaim, Samech Neuflim, the Eibishter supports those who have fallen. Rofei Chaylim, Hashem helps those who are sick. Umatir Asurim, and he releases those that are confined. So he said another pshat. He said, Matir Asurim is not going on the Chayla. That already was covered by Rofei Chaylim. When Rachmana litzlan, someone is sick, the whole family is tied up to this person. The whole family life changes. The atmosphere in the house changes. But when the Eibishter then is Rofei Chaylim, not only is he Rofei Chaylim, but he's Matir Asurim. All those that were tied from the Chayla are now free. How many times does the whole family structure change? And if that's the case, then the next set of guidelines that we have put together for all of us tonight is the guidelines on how to treat a family of a chayla. People have told me, the worst thing that you can say to a family is call me if you need anything. That means nothing. Call me. What does it mean, call me? What are they going to ask you for? Be specific. Can I offer you a ride to the hospital? That's a specific thing. Can I babysit for one of your children? Children are a great concern, Nebuch, to parents that are stuck in a hospital. Offer to help with the child's homework. Of course the teacher's going to let the kid get away with the homework if he didn't do it, if he knows his father or mother never has yana machla. But that child is falling not only in the family structure, but he's falling in school. So offer specific help with homework. That's a specific help for the family. A lady who Nebuch, her husband, eventually passed away. But she told me she had people who offered to stay in the hospital on an overnight shift. People that have family members that are sick, are tired and exhausted mentally and physically, and they're embarrassed to ask somebody to stay overnight. But if you can manage one night to give over, to be able to stay there, to be a helpmate along to the nurses or doctors, what a tremendous chesed. And offer to take their children for supper or for lunch. The main thing is when you are doing things for a family, those that are tied to the chayla, offer a specific type of help, not just general, because general really doesn't mean much. When I first heard the story, I heard it from the person to whom it happened. But I feel it's a tremendous chus for him, and I don't want to chas v'sholom give him my inhora, so I'm not going to tell you the name of the person to whom it happened, but I just tell you that this person, and I wrote about it, so some of you certainly know the story, this person, a Rav, a very, very chashuv Rav, was very, very sick with yana machla. He's a tremendous, tremendous Talmud Chacham, and he had entree to the Stipler. And he went, after his operation, he went to Eretz Yisrael, and he came to the Stipler, and he asked the Stipler, what should he do as a schus? And the Stipler told him something absolutely remarkable. If you have never heard it, again, it is absolutely remarkable. And Elu Dvorim, we say every morning, these are the things, and the Stipler says, it says, these are the things that have no shear, that a person gets schusim in this world and in the next world. So the Stipler said, Biko Cholim, I understand. Shortly after that should be Avos HaMeis. Where does Achnosas Kala come in? So the Stipler told him, if you want to have a schus, if you're holding by the Madrega of Biko Cholim, people are being mavaka you, and you want to keep away that Avos HaMeis, what you should do is open up an account for Kalas. Get involved in Achnosas Kala. What a tremendous chus. It's more than 10 years already. This Rav is, you all know his name, but of course not everybody knows this story. About that it's about him. Maybe should have him help and he should have 120. But the idea is, listen to that Einfall, that between Biko Chaylim and Avos HaMeis, if a person wants to have schus, he should get involved in Achnosas Kala. But we know that ever since Adam HaRishon, no one lives forever. And there's going to come a time for all of us, and for our friends, and for all that we love and hold so dear, nobody lives forever. And so therefore there comes a time of Nicham Avelim. And one then has to be consoled and comforted. And I want to tell you about 4 books that I would like to recommend, and that I put down also on this chart that you will all get. 4 wonderful books that people have told me have given them tremendous chizuk in illness and a tremendous chizuk nebuch when they are sitting shiva and afterwards. The first one is a wonderful book put out by Art Scroll. It's called Tehillim Treasury by Avram Chaim Foyer. It brings from all the psukim of David HaMelech chizuk. There was nobody who had more tzoros than David HaMelech, with family, with enemies, not being recognized by anyone, and yet David is always mizmor. David is always singing. David is somehow able, through the worst times of life, is able to find emunah and betachon b'Hashem, and this book is a tremendous, tremendous source of strength. The second book that I would recommend, I mentioned this once in a drasha, Facing Adversity with Faith. It's written, it says, by M.L. Kramer. It's not M.L. Kramer. When I was in Manchester in England, I was asked to go in to visit a woman who's a brilliant woman who gives shiurim. And at that time she introduced herself to me. She could hardly walk. She never has multiple sclerosis. Her name is Rebbe Chavi Wakshal. And she gives tremendous amount of shiurim, nebach, but her body is getting worse and worse slowly but surely every day. And she's in awesome pain. Very, very, a tremendous tzaddikus. And she wrote this book, Facing Adversity with Faith. It's impossible not to cry to read it. But it's something that will give a person faith, because she was very close to the Rosh Hashiva Rabbi Yehuda Zev Segel. And many of the tzaddikim who have come through Manchester visited with her and have given her chizuk. It's a tremendous book of chizuk. The third book that I would like to recommend is a book that was first written in Hebrew called Lekach Toiv. But Rav Nachman Buhlman, a brilliant writer, a tremendous Talmud Chacham, one of the Rosh Hashivas in Har Sameach, translated it in English. He did a masterful job. It's called Longing for Dawn. A beautiful book all about Nichum Avelim, how Avelim themselves can get chizuk. But here, finally, is the most remarkable book of all. It's the smallest book of all, and it's not even written by somebody, older people. An amazing story about this wonderful book. A number of years ago, I was at a bris, and a high school girl, comes over to me, and she says to me that she and her friends are writing a book. And she asked if she could use one of my stories. So I said, of course, you just have to say it's reprinted with permission, and it's no problem. And I must tell you the truth, that when she sent me the book, I put it on my desk, and I never really read it carefully until I had to prepare for this talk. This book was written by 4 girls. A remarkable book. This book was written by Chava Axelrod, Shoshana Frankel, Miriam Gewurtz, and Afrona Hoffman. They went to the high school of Yeshiva of Greater Washington. They came to their principal one day, and they said they wanted to do extracurricular work. So he said to them, "You girls are so involved in Cassette. You're involved in helping families. Why don't you write a book on Mishlei, on the chizuk that Shlomo HaMelech gave to Klal Yisrael through the words of Mishlei?" And then they wrote this book, Friends for Life, a guidebook for friends of terminally ill teenagers. Nebuch, if chas v'shalom anybody has a friend, it could obviously be an adult as well, and kol shekain a child. This book is so precious. And so I called the principal today, and I said, "Tell me about these girls. Who are these girls? What made them do it?" And he told me something remarkable, which I didn't know until today. They said not only did these girls put this book together, and he said the telephone number is here for the school. Anybody who wants it, there's no charge. You want to send something to the school, fine, I'll send you whatever you want. The number is on the page, which you will all get. But they said there's a little boy in our town. A little boy who, when he was 2 years old, Nebuch had a terrible, terrible accident in a pool. And Nebuch, he's been in a coma for the last 7 years. His little boy is Shauli Mordechai, a Sephardish boy. And these girls, among other girls, went every day to do exercises with this child, to help the parents and help the family. And I said to Rabbi Katz, the principal of this yeshiva, "What did you say this little boy's name is? Shauli?" I said, "I just saw an ad in the Ated, Stories for Shauli. Is that this little boy?" He said, "Yes." He says, "You don't know the story about this book? Listen to an amazing story, and listen what it means to give chizuk to a family." There was a fellow in Silver Springs. He's a lawyer. His name is Judge Yehuda Lipschitz. He lives 1 block from this little boy. I would like to read to you what he wrote in the introduction for this book, Stories for Shauli. This book is really a book that was written by a Sephardish Talmud Chacham in Eretz Yisrael. It was written, it's called Chachmei Yisrael Bi'aldusam. But I want to share with you part of the introduction that this man wrote. Stories for Shauli is a collection of stories about Gedolim and how they grew up. These stories are for Shauli, an 8-year-old boy who lives just a few doors down the block from me. Shauli met with a terrible accident as a baby, Rachmana litzlan, and he has been very sick ever since. I see him and his family often. Yet in the years that I have known him, Shauli has been unable to speak to me. He has never come over to play, nor has he ridden his bike past my house. He has never gone to school in the winter or to camp in the summer. Shauli has not been able to do the things that other children his age do. Instead, Shauli is tended to night and day by his devoted parents, nurses, and volunteers. It was only a year ago that I first acquired a deeper and more accurate understanding of the meaning of Shauli's life. He was in the hospital again, in the intensive care unit at Children's Hospital, where he spent so much time. I visited him and was greeted by his extraordinary mother, whose anguished face told of an exhausted yet forceful determination to see Shauli through another life-threatening experience. In her hands was a worn Tillim. I thought to myself, does she really need the book? After 7 years, she must know Tillim by heart. We started to talk. Shauli's condition was critical. Hashem Yerachem, the mother said repeatedly. May Hashem have mercy. And then she told me how upset she was that one of the nurses had suggested that the time had come to give up the fight. They don't understand, the mother said. Shauli is not a sick body. There's an neshama in that child's sick body. And I'm responsible for the care of that neshama. I shuddered then when I first heard those words, and I shudder now as I repeat them. For it was upon hearing those words that I began to understand so much more about the meaning of Shauli's life. I repeated to myself, Shauli is not a very sick child. He's a holy neshama sent to this world for a holy purpose. How many perakim of Tillim have been recited because of him? How many prayers have been offered by Jews all over the world in his merit? How many blot of Gemara have been analyzed on his account? Who amongst us, except for Gedolim, live a life so completely dedicated to uplifting the spirituality of the Jewish people? It was then that I decided that these marvelous stories about Gedolim should be stories for Shauli. Stories about young children who grew up to become great Gedolim. Could you imagine the chizuk that parents get when they see that we are reading this book? When they see that a parent down the block, not related, goes and spends his own money to translate and publish a book, How Children Became Gedolim. That's chizuk for a family. That's chizuk. That's chesed with cheshbon. That's what we have to learn. Sometimes it's not something we can do for the chayla. Sometimes Nebuch, there's nothing to do. But if you show a genuine concern and a genuine gefühl, that's the chizuk. That's the chizuk we can hope to give for others. The pasuk tells us in Kehelah Zion Beis, Tov lalachas el beis ovel. It's better to go to an ovel's house than to go to a partying house, because v'hachai yitein aliboy. A person will take it to heart. So it's not only good for us when we go, and it's not only good for the ovel when we go, but it's also good for the nifter. The Gemara tells us a story. The Gemara tells us a story in Shabbos Kufnan Beis and Beis, that a man died and there was nobody to sit shiva for him. So Rabbi Yehuda took 10 people and he had them sit in this man's house, and they kind of sat shiva for 7 days. And afterwards this man came to Rabbi Yehuda in a dream and he said, Tanuach datcha, let your mind be at ease. Shehinachta es dati, you set my mind at ease. In other words, when a person, Rachmana litzlan, is sitting shiva, there are 3 people who gain. The one who comes gains, because he's going to get serious about life. The Ovel gains, because after all, people are comforting him. And the Nifter gains. So Rav David Krohn told me that because of this Gemara, when a person, Rachmana litzlan, is sitting shiva alone, you can still say, Hamokim Yenachem Eschem. What's the Eschem? What's the Lashon Rabbim? The Torah says it's not only this person, but it's the Nifter that's being comforted. And if that's the case, then we have to understand that coming to be Menachem Ovel is not a reunion of old friends. Sometimes when you come to a house of Shiva, you might think that a party's going on. People haven't seen each other in years. Everybody's getting up on the latest engagements, the latest business deals. It's wonderful. It's a happy thing. They should just serve Coke and beer and pretzels. That's not what a base oval is supposed to look like. A base oval is a serious thing. You know how you console people. I saw such a beautiful, touching story. There was Nebuch, a young almana, a young almana that her husband passed away, and no one was able to console her. Finally, Rabbi Levine came to her home, and she was crying, and nothing that he could say made her feel any better. And finally she said to him, "Tell me, what's with all the tears? All the tears that I cried when I said so much Tehillim day and night. All the tears when I davened. What happened to all those tears?" Listen to what Rabbi Levine told her. Rabbi Levine told her that there's a pasuk in Tehillim that tells us that every single sincere tear that a person sheds, the Eibishter puts in a pitcher, he puts in a flask. And he said the Eibishter takes those tears and he saves every one of them. And when this Chas v'Shalom Tzara is supposed to be in Klal Yisrael, Hashem takes those tears and he wipes away that Tzara so it shouldn't come. So your tears are there, they are saved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make sure that Tzaras don't come to Klal Yisrael. A few weeks later, this almana called Rav Arya, and she said, "Tell me that again." That was the only thing that gave her chizuk. And when I saw this story, it occurred to me perhaps a new pshat in that which we say in the Ilan Yom Kippur. To me, this phrase in Yom Kippur is the thing that breaks me up the most in the whole day of Yom Kippur. I can't understand how a person does not fall apart if he's davening this phrase, which I'll tell you right now in the Ilah. But now with Rabbi Levine, we understand the new pshat. Yirotze lefanecha, shemei kol bichyos. As the Ilah is closing, we all cry out, Hashem, please listen to the voice of our cries. Shetasim dimoiseinu b'noit chaliyos. Take our tears and put them in a flask. V'tatzilenu b'kol gzeiros al-shoriyos. And save us from any shrek l'chad zeiros, from any shrek l'chad decrees. What's the connection to the tears, to the gzeiros? But now we understand. If Rabbi Levine is telling us that those tears are the things that wipe away the gzeiros, that they shouldn't come. So when we cry because a person passed away, or we cry in sincerity, shetosim dimoiseinu, those goof of those tears are the ones that tatzilenu mikol gzeiros achzoriyos. That's what's going to save us from shrek l'chad gzeiros. That's how you talk to an almana. That's how you talk to people. And so therefore, when the next time, when any of us come to be Menachem Mavo, talk about the nifter. Think about that person. Did you have any shaykhs to him? Do you remember anything about him or her? Or maybe ask the Ovo about the nifter. Ask what the Maspidim said. If you don't know, he'll tell you what the Maspidim said. That will get the Ovo to talk about the person who passed away. Don't ever bring up an irrelevant topic. If the Ovo asks you about school or about business, you have no choice. You're going to have to answer. But don't you bring up anything that doesn't have to do with the Ovel. A few almanas told me recently that one of the most comforting things to them were the letters that people wrote. Sometimes it's very hard to express personally what a person feels. But a woman told me, every year on the yard side she takes out all the letters that she got about her child that passed away. Every year she takes out those painful letters, and that's the nechama. So if you find that you can't express yourself personally, then write a meaningful letter. Never pry with questions about medical care of the nifter. Who cares what happened? It's too late anyway. And again, don't say, "Oh, if only he would have been in another hospital. If only he would have had another doctor." And people do say those things. "Oh, we should have gone to Germany where they got that treatment, that natural treatment, that whatever it's called." Nothing's going to help. If the Eibishter knows that this is a person's time, he could be walking in the street and it's going to be all over. A person is supposed to be mishtada whatever he can. But once a person passes away, chas v'shalom, never to make a family feel that they perhaps didn't do the right treatments. One of the things that Avelim is so painful when a person says, "I know how you feel." You don't know how they feel. If you never were in their position, if they have lost a husband and you, Baruch Hashem, have not lost a husband, you have no right to say, "I know how you feel." Only those in that position can use that expression. I was just in England at the Aguda convention in Europe. And it was an amazing thing, wonderful, wonderful tzaddikim Wonderful balabatim askarim, just very, very uplifting. And one fellow told me an amazing story that should give all of us chizuk and anybody else that we have to tell it to. There's a wonderful doctor, a very frum doctor at Tzaddik Abiyid, Dr. Adler, who lives in London. So one of his patients was Rav Segel, the Manchester Rosh Hashiva. He came to London. So as he was leaving the office, Mrs. Adler, the wife of Dr. Adler, was sitting in the anteroom. So the Talmud of Rav Segel said, maybe the Rosh Hashiva will give Mrs. Adler a bracha. So Rav Segel said to the Talmud, what bracha should I give her? So he said, give Mrs. Adler a bracha, she should never have avmas nefesh. So Rav Segel said, such a bracha cannot be given. Every person has avmas nefesh in life. The bracha that I can give her is that when she has avmas nefesh, she should be able to cope with it. And that's the bracha that he gave her. The next week, Mrs. Adler never had a heart attack. And she was in the hospital, and she told all her family and friends, what kept her going, and Baruch Hashem, she's healthy today, what kept her going was the Rosh Hashiva's bracha. Of course, we're all going to have avmas nefesh. Everybody has it in different ways. Nobody gets off free. But we have it. But the Eibusher should bench us, that we should be able to cope with it. That's what you can tell the Ovel. I understand that you have avmas nefesh. The Eibusher should help you, that you should be able to cope with it. There's a lady in this audience. She didn't want that I should mention her name, but I'll just tell you it's Esther. So anybody who's not Esther, no, I'm not referring to you. But anyway, when she saw that I was going to talk on this topic, she wrote me a very beautiful letter about things that she had gone through. And she wrote me something which I simply cannot get over. I called her to say, is this your part? She said, no, she heard it from somebody, but it's terrific. And she was talking about the importance. He said, I was polishing to talk. Finally, I said to everybody there, guys, ask me some questions, I want to talk. The other has to get it out. Listen. And you know what this lady wrote me? That the same letters that you spell the word silent is the same letters as the word listen. Isn't that amazing? Write it out. You'll see. I wrote it out 4 times. I couldn't believe it. If you have to listen, that means you have to be silent. Not yes, I understand, and then you tell your tzara. That's not the place to talk about your tzaras. Nobody wants to hear your history in the Beis Ovel. What they want is they want to be able to get it out. They want to be able to talk. And again, there are many people who don't know what to say in a Beis Ovel. No one is blaming you. But a certain almana told me recently, the worst thing is when people come and just stare. She said it was Gehenna on this earth. People come, I understand, they want to be close. Her husband died in a terrible way. And people come, and they mean well, but then get up, say the pasuk, and leave, unless you're going to say something. And if you have nothing to say, I understand, but don't stare. You know what it is to sit up front and have 30 people just staring and nobody's moving, and it's quiet, it's terrible. And finally, don't stay long. Just like in the hospital, don't stay long. The Avelim are exhausted. They hardly get a chance to eat. There are many people who, when they're davening in the morning, so they stay after Aleinu, they stay for about 25 minutes, and then what happens? The first shift starts coming because they figured, well, it's 25 minutes after davening, probably they ate breakfast. But they don't realize 10 people stay after davening. So the Avelim don't want to excuse themselves because it's not nice. So therefore then they go to lunch and they're still starving. And so a person has to understand, you have to be sensitive to the Avelim as well. Let them talk. Bring up about the nifter. That's the whole purpose of going there. The Rambam tells us something very interesting. The Rambam tells us, Keitzad menachmim eso havelim. How are you menachem the ovel? It's in Hilchas Ovel Yud Gimel Gimel. He says, as soon as the ovel nods his head, and he understands and he acknowledges, he's not allowed to say goodbye, but he acknowledges that it's time, he understands that you've been here. then you're not allowed to sit there anymore. And he writes, Shelo yatrichuhu yosem edai. It's not easy to sit Shiva. And so therefore a person has to be sensitive. You want to do the mitzvah, that's fine, but it has to be with a limit. Tell the family that you gave tzedakah. That's a beautiful thing for them. It's a tremendous chizuk. But one thing we must all know, that you're never ever going to replace that loss. And they will never ever forget that person. So as good and as well-intentioned as you are, know that you're there to be able to do a mitzvah and to give as much comfort as possible. But redzach nit'ain, that your being there is going to take away that terrible pain. And I want to tell you something very, very painful. In our neighborhood, a number of years ago, some of you know I've talked about it a lot, there was a fire in the neighborhood the day before Shavuos B'Tammuz. And Nebuch, there was a family that was caught in that fire, the Silbergleit family. And Nebuch, one of the little girls, Masha Miriam, she was in the hospital for a few months, terrible burn victim, and eventually she passed away, and it was Sukkot. It was Sukkot that she passed away, and it came to the Levaya. And one of the people, of course, on Sukkot, Cholamoid Sukkot, you're not allowed to give a hesped. So there was a Rav, Rabbi Aryeh Ginsburg, who gave Divrei Chizuk, and he told something that he told me later that he saw, he believed in the Vilna Gaon. An amazing thing. The Vilna Gaon told over a mashal, and he told over a mashal, he said that there was once a tailor, a Yiddish tailor, who was called by a king to make a suit for him. Now this king hated Jews, but he had no choice. This was the best tailor around. So he called this tailor and he asked him to make the suit. And the suit was absolutely magnificent. When the king brought it home and the queen saw it, she said, "That Jew made you this suit? Look what he did. He took all the material, he kept it for himself, and even with some of the material he left over, he made you the suit. But all that material that you gave him, he kept for himself. He's going to make a fortune on it." So the king was very angry, and he calls in this tailor, and he says, "I gave you so much material. Look at this suit. It's truck, it's a nice suit, but where's all that other material? You kept it for yourself." So the tailor said, "Wait a second." And he takes the suit and he starts taking it apart. And the king says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Just wait." And he opens up the collar, and he opens up the pockets, and he opens up the flaps, and he opens up the cuffs, and he opens up everything. And then when he opens it up and he spreads everything out and all the layers of the clothing, the king sees it's all there. He just didn't realize it. So he said, so the Vilna Gaon said, and again in Yom Kippur, when we say the Ela Eskara, again a very sad tefillah about those Tanoim and Amorim that were killed. When Rabbi Shmuel was killed, so it says, Sorfei Malat Soku B'mora, the Malachim, they cried out, Zu Torah v'Zu Schara. This is the Torah and this is the Schar. That's what happens if somebody such a big tzaddik gets killed like Rabbi Gamliel, like Rabbi Shmuel. So the Eibishter answered, if I hear another word, I'm going to bring the world to Mayim. And Toyev Avoyo. What kind of teretz is that? That's a good kasha. Zu Torah v'Zu Schara. Is it fair that it should happen to Rabbi Shmuel like that? But the teretz the Vilna Gaon said is that the beginning of the world, when Hashem created the world, it was all Mayim. It was all Toyev Avoyo. There's a master plan. And what he said to the Malachim is, if you talk one more word, I'm going to bring back the whole world to where it was, and then you'll understand my master plan. That's exactly what this king was told. If you take apart the whole material, then you'll understand the whole master plan, what the suit was. We will never understand why young people die. We will never understand why those that are so dear to us are taken at any age. But one thing we understand, that there is a master plan. And all of us who come to be Menachem over, we try to give as much comfort as we can. But let us do the mitzvah, give them strength, and understand that we can never replace for them. And if that's the case, then we have the obligation to keep our visit short and then let others continue. Many people know, and I can tell you personally, when my father Shalom passed away, the Shiva was the easiest part. The Shiva is the easiest part because everybody's there. The family is there. You feel a bond. You feel a bond with the community. Everybody's doing things. But then what happens afterwards? The Shleishim, and then the year after. That's when the Gehenna really starts. That's when it's all very, very, very difficult. And perhaps then, finally, what we put together is some guidelines how to treat people never after Shiva. When a person is an almana or an alman, or people are Yisayimim, be available, but don't be aggressive. That means be available for the people. Sometimes they need you, and if they say, don't come today, don't say, no, I'll come and I'll go with you. People need their privacy. People have to have time to grieve. Don't shun them. Many people feel that after Nebuch that they lose a spouse, that they're not invited any place. I have a friend who lost his wife, and he told me he was invited someplace. And this place had regular seating, separate seating, family seating they had, and they also had seating, separate men, separate women. When he walked into the hall, it was right where the family seating was. And he couldn't take it, because his wife had just passed away. He couldn't be at a place where men and women were sitting together, and he left. But then again, he wasn't invited by that family anymore, and that was very painful to him. A person has to understand, don't disregard. Make sure that you invite those that have lost a spouse. Keep up the friendship. Offer to go shopping for them or with them. Offer to take children and buy clothes. When you're buying clothes for your children, buy clothes for their children. Invite them for a Shabbos meal. But don't forget that if they say no, it's they want their family privacy, and they appreciate that you invited them. But at least continue to invite. Eventually they'll come. A fellow told me, this fellow who lost his wife told me that a guy called him up and said, would you come to us for Pesach? He said, I've never had a Seder without my family alone. Just because he doesn't have a wife is not a reason that he doesn't want to have a Seder. So he said, but would you invite me for Shabbos instead? So the guy said, no, that's not choshev. Could you imagine? Could you imagine somebody saying that? In other words, you're my Esri, you're my Oni, kol divchen yesev v'yechol. But if it's not kol divchen yesev v'yechol, a regular Shabbos, you might as well stay home. That's painful. And another almana told me, she made a bar mitzvah, and she didn't want people to come over to her, which they did, and say, oh, it must be so bittersweet for you. Many people say that. At a chassan, if never somebody, only one spouse is alive, it must be so bittersweet. It is, but they don't want you to tell it to them. They want you to say, the bar mitzvah boy gave a tremendous drasha, just like what you would say to any other family. His drasha was good, he looked so handsome, the collar's beautiful, you should always have nachas. Just because a woman is an almana or a man is an alman gives no one the license to pry into their private lives. And finally, something that's so important, not everybody can do this, but make sure if you can, that their primary source of parnasa is still continued. And I will always be grateful for certain people that went out of their way. I was 21 when my father Shalom passed away. And believe me, anybody who's a mother here knows you don't want any 21-year-old kid doing a bris on your kid. I still remember, I used to walk in and people would say, oh, you look so young. I would say, well, the baby's also young. But believe me, it wasn't easy. But there were people who went out of their way to go and to help me. I just want to end just with these thoughts. We'll review and we'll end with a great thought. Let's remember that we are in the period of Leiv Tov. It is the period of 49 days of Sphira. We're going to elevate ourselves. That's what the Slonim Rebbe says. 1 to 49, down 49 to 1. That's not how we count. We count because we want to elevate our Leiv Tov and Midas Tovos. The Se'orim is the Michael Behema, the Omer. The Shtei Alachem on Pesach is the Michael Adam. We go from the lowest level to the highest level. We want to be Yidden of Spartan, those that are the sapphires, to have that glowing character. Rav Meir Shapiro told us we are Adam Atem. We are all one Yid because we all feel the pain for each other. But we must learn to do Chesed the right way. Let's remember how Rav Shlomo Zalman was sensitive to that kala. Let's remember how Rav Meir Chodesh didn't want to have anybody in the room when that medic came in so that he wouldn't be embarrassed. Let's remember those three simonim. Rachmonim, Baishonim, Gomel Chasodim. If you want to be a Rachman, you want to be a Gomel Chesed, remember that the recipient is a Baishon. Don't embarrass him. Don't be there if he doesn't want you to be there. Ask the family. Let's remember the Mishkal HaChasidus. That means people shouldn't be Misameach Chosim V'Kala if there's a babysitter that has to go home, or if parents are waiting up. Or as Rapam said, a husband shouldn't make his wife wait because he went to take somebody to the airport and he didn't have the seichel to call at home. Let's remember the visiting rules. Ask a family if the patient wants visitors. Make your visit short. Don't ask too many questions. Never read the hospital charts. Abide by hospital rules regarding visiting time and when to leave. Obviously, don't stare at the patient to make him uncomfortable. Leave the room when the doctor or the nurses come in, and never tell a patient that the doctor is inferior. And as we said, as the Rebbetzin said, be considerate to the patient's roommates. Let's remember that the family is tied as well, and that we should offer specific help to a family. Rides to the hospital, babysitting with the children, help with the children's homework, taking the children for lunch or supper. Let's remember those 4 books. Those 4 wonderful books that will give chizuk to any of your friends that may be ill or achas v'shalom avelim. Let's remember Tov L'Leches LeBeis Ovel. It's true, if you go to a Beis Ovel, it helps because v'hachai yiten aliboy. But then on the other hand, let's remember to keep a certain decorum. Let us try to be Menachem Avelim like Rav Aryeh Levine was Menachem Bet Almona. And let's remember the rules in the home. Talk about the nifter only. If you don't know the nifter, ask what the Maspidim said. Don't talk about irrelevant topics. Don't pry with questions about his medical care. And certainly remember that you have to listen. Being a good listener means being one that is silent. And again, don't stay for a very long time. Let us know that we can never explain a loss. We can only be comforters. And if we can be comforters, let us only be there for a short time and then go on. Let's remember not to forget those people after the Shiva. That's when the Gehenim starts, after the Shloshim, after the year. I know somebody who was in the year of Avelis, and every time that they would have been invited to a certain chasana, they were, but they couldn't come, and another friend of theirs was there, they would always call them from the chasana and say, we know that you would have liked to have been here. We're thinking about you. What a wonderful, beautiful midah that somebody would do that. And so then let's again remember the rules after the Shiva, throughout the time afterwards. Be available but not aggressive. Don't shun them, continue to invite them. Don't pry into their private lives unless they allow you to. Offer to take their children with them. And then, of course, invite them to Shabbosim. But if they don't want to come, doesn't mean that they don't appreciate it, but allow them that courtesy. At the Aguda convention in Europe, there was a very big Talmud Chacham, Rav Shimon Hirschler. He told a delightful little story. He told a story when he was a bar mitzvah boy. Dr. Solomon Schoenfeld was there, and he asked a kasha that we should all ask. It says in the Brach, Asher Yotzar es ha'adam b'chochma. Hashem creates every person with wisdom. Hashem has a tremendous wisdom in how He made a person with his lungs and his heart and his spleen and his intestines. It's all a perfect symphony. So Dr. Schoenfeld asked, what do you mean, Asher Yotzar es ha'adam b'chochma? It says, everybody, everything was created. The whole world was created with Chachma. The Torah says, he says, the Pshat is, Hashem created a person with wisdom. Every person is blessed with wisdom. So Rav Shimon Hirschler said, Dr. Schoenfeld said to him, Shimon, you're a clever boy. Hashem gave you Chachma. Don't let him down. And I'm saying to all of you, Hashem gave all of you Chachma. The mere fact that you would come to a shir, the mere fact that you would come to try to improve yourself, that shows that you have chachma. Let's not let each other down. Let's remember that pasuk that tells us, Ashrei maskil el dol. Fortunate is the person who uses seichel when he deals with those that are unfortunate. B'yayim ra malteu Hashem. On the day of a disaster, he'll be saved. Let us use seichel. Let us use seichel when we're dealing with others. Let us come to Shavuos. Klal Yisrael was Zeicha to Shavuos for one reason. Because as it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, they were all there under the mountain. Vayichan, it's a Lashon Yachid, Ki Ish Echad, B'Leiv Echad. There was Achdus in Klal Yisrael. The Leiv should from tonight on become that Leiv Tov. And remember, just put yourselves in the other person's shoes and think how you would want to be treated. That's how we should treat others. And if we learn that sensitivity, then truly we'll have developed our Leiv Echad. We'll be able to be Ba'aguda Achas with Shalom and Reus, the Eibusha should help us, that from tonight on, we should never have tsaris. All those that are ill should be cured. Those that need comfort should get it. And the Eibusha should give us the ultimate comfort by bringing Mashiach in our time. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
I'm enjoying your book so much.
Thank you.
The family fighting over it.
Thank you.